They've known about this for over 100 years. Two completely ordinary metals, cheaper than a fast food meal that can kill almost any bug, any bacteria, any pathogen on contact. No chemicals, no sprays, no subscriptions. And yet somehow you've never heard about it. Not from your doctor, not from your exterminator, not even from the people selling you $40 bottles of bug spray every summer. That silence? It isn't an accident. Let's go back to ancient Egypt, 3,000 years ago. Egyptian healers were using something unusual to treat wounds and infections. They weren't using herbs. They weren't using plant extracts. They were pressing sheets of a specific metal directly onto wounds, and those wounds healed faster. They stayed clean. The infection didn't spread. Historians wrote it off as superstition for centuries. But modern scientists eventually ran the tests. And what they found rewrote everything we thought we knew about how to fight bacteria and bugs. That metal was copper. And the second metal, zinc, was working right alongside it, hiding in plain sight in almost every hardware store in America. Together, these two metals do something that the entire pesticide industry has quietly worked to make sure you never figure out on your own. Here's what most people don't know. The moment a bacterium, a virus, or an insect comes into sustained contact with copper, something catastrophic happens at the cellular level. Copper ions, essentially electrically charged copper particles, punch through the outer membrane of the cell like a microscopic battering ram. Once inside, they scramble the DNA. They destroy the proteins that allow the organism to function. They generate what scientists call reactive oxygen species, a kind of internal chemical fire that burns the cell from the inside out. And the organism cannot adapt to this. It cannot build resistance. It cannot evolve around it. It simply dies. The technical name for this is the oligodynamic effect. It was first formally documented in 1893 by a Swiss botanist named Carl Wilhelm von Nageli. He noticed that even trace amounts of certain metals were lethal to microscopic organisms. He ran careful experiments. He published his findings. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel. And for a few decades, scientists were genuinely excited. But that was 1893. Long before the age of synthetic chemistry, before the pesticide industry existed, before there was any money in telling people to install copper pipes and touch doorknobs, the discovery got buried under decades of profit-driven pharmaceutical and chemical research, and the world moved on without it. But that wasn't the most interesting part. Because while copper was getting forgotten in labs, something strange was happening in real hospitals and real kitchens and real farms without anyone quite understanding why. Hospitals that still used copper fixtures, old hospitals, built before plastic became the default, had dramatically lower rates of hospital-acquired infections. The nurses couldn't explain it. The administrators chalked it up to older, stricter cleaning protocols. But the pattern kept showing up decade after decade in study after study. Copper surfaces were basically self-sanitizing. A dangerous pathogen dropped on a copper surface would be dead within minutes. The same pathogen dropped on a stainless steel surface, which is what almost every modern hospital uses, could survive for days. Think about that for a second. We replaced copper with stainless steel in hospitals, in kitchens, in plumbing. We did it because steel was cheaper to manufacture and easier to market. And in doing so, we quietly handed bacteria a surface where they could live for days and hitchhike from patient to patient. Now here's where zinc enters the story. Zinc works differently than copper, but the effect is similarly devastating for pests and pathogens. Zinc disrupts enzyme function. Insects and bacteria rely on specific enzymes to breathe, to reproduce, to digest food. When zinc ions interfere with those enzymes, it's like pulling the spark plugs out of an engine. Everything stops. And here's the key detail. Zinc is already present in your body in healthy amounts. It's essential to human immune function. So when you use zinc against bugs and bacteria, it's toxic to them and completely safe for you. That asymmetry is the secret weapon that the chemical industry doesn't want you thinking about. And this is where things get really fascinating. When you combine copper and zinc, you don't just get two separate effects. You get something called a galvanic reaction, a tiny continuous electrochemical process that generates a sustained low-level field of metal ions. If you've ever seen an old penny turn green, you've seen the byproduct of this reaction. But the reaction itself is working silently and continuously, generating the exact ions that are lethal to bacteria, fungi, and insects. Brass, the alloy you've seen on door handles and plumbing fixtures for centuries, is literally a mixture of copper and zinc. Ancient craftsmen didn't know they were building antimicrobial surfaces. They just knew brass seemed to stay cleaner than other metals. They were right, and they were doing it by accident. Now let's talk about what this means for you, practically, in your home, right now. Cockroaches, ants, spiders, flies, the bugs that get into your kitchen, your basement, your garage. Most people reach for a can of something toxic, spray it around, and then wonder why they're still seeing bugs 2 weeks later. What almost nobody knows is that copper mesh, Literally a woven mesh of copper wire available at any hardware store for a few dollars is one of the most effective pest barriers ever discovered. Bugs will not cross a copper barrier. Slugs and snails die on contact with it. Ants detect the ionic charge and route around it. It doesn't poison your air. It doesn't contaminate your food. It doesn't require repeated application. You install it once and it works for years. But the application goes far deeper than pest barriers. There's a growing movement of homeowners and builders, quietly, without much media attention, who are reinstalling copper surfaces in high-touch areas of their homes. Door handles, light switches, countertops, bathroom fixtures. Not because copper is fashionable, because they've read the research and they understand that a copper doorknob kills the flu virus within minutes of contact, while a standard metal doorknob can harbor it for 72 hours. In flu season alone, that's a massive difference in infection risk for you and your family. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel. And here's where the buried part of this story gets genuinely infuriating. In 2008, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency officially registered copper as the first solid antimicrobial material in history. That was a landmark decision. Scientists were excited. Hospitals started running pilot programs to test copper surfaces. The results were extraordinary. One major study published in Infection Control and Hospital Epidemiology found that hospitals using copper surfaces reduced infection rates by over 58%. 58%. That's not a marginal improvement. That's a transformation of patient safety. And then, quietly, the momentum slowed. The studies kept coming in with positive results, but mainstream adoption stalled because copper is expensive to install at scale, because the cleaning product industry had no product to sell you, because the disinfectant industry had no spray to market, because the pest control industry couldn't bill you monthly for a one-time copper mesh installation. The financial incentive structure of modern healthcare and pest control points completely away from a cheap, permanent, metal-based solution. And so the research sat in journals, and most people never heard about it. Here's the practical part, the part that actually changes how you live. For bugs getting into your home through gaps and cracks, under doors, around pipe penetrations, through foundation cracks, copper mesh is your answer. You press it into the gap, it stays put. Bugs don't cross it. Rodents won't chew through it the way they chew through foam or rubber. It's physically and chemically hostile to anything that shouldn't be in your home. For surfaces in your kitchen and bathroom, zinc-based coatings and copper-infused materials are now available in home improvement stores. They're marketed quietly, without the fanfare they deserve. A zinc-coated cutting board, a copper-surfaced countertop insert near the sink. These aren't gimmicks. They're the logical application of a century of microbiological research for your garden. And this one surprises most people. A copper ring around your potted plants stops slugs dead. No poison, no bait traps, no gel, just a copper strip around the base of the pot. The slug approaches, detects the ionic charge, and turns around. It's been working since before pesticides existed. Gardeners in England were using copper rings in the early 1900s. The knowledge just got lost in the noise. For air quality and surface contamination during cold and flu season, consider where your family's hands touch most. Door handles, cabinet pulls, faucet handles, light switches. These are the transmission highways for respiratory viruses. Copper versions of all of these exist. They're not expensive. They're available online and in hardware stores. And unlike hand sanitizer, you don't have to remember to use them. They work automatically all the time, whether anyone is thinking about them or not. Now step back and look at the full picture here. We are surrounded by a chemical industry that profits from selling us solutions to problems that a piece of metal could solve permanently. The pesticide on your shelf costs $15 and lasts 3 months. The copper mesh in your doorframe costs $8 and lasts a decade. The disinfectant wipes on your counter kill bacteria for about 2 minutes after you use them. A copper surface kills bacteria continuously, for free, indefinitely. The math is staggering when you actually sit with it. This isn't a conspiracy in the classic sense. No one sat in a room and decided to suppress copper. What happened is more mundane and more insidious than that. Our entire economic system around health and pest control was built on recurring revenue. One-time solutions don't generate revenue. Ongoing dependency does. And so the industry organically, without conscious coordination, moved away from permanent metal-based solutions and toward endless product cycles. And we followed along because nobody told us there was another option. The ancient Egyptians knew. The Roman aqueduct engineers who used lead pipes noticed that copper ones seemed safer. The 19th century Swiss scientist who first documented the oligodynamic effect knew. The hospital administrators in copper-fitted buildings knew, even when they couldn't explain why. And now you know. 2 cheap metals, 100 years of buried research, and a solution sitting in your hardware store right now for less than the cost of a bug spray you'll throw away in 3 months. That's what Life Decoded is here for. to find the things hiding in plain sight that actually change how you live, and to make sure the information that was never supposed to reach you reaches you. If this gave you a new way of looking at something you thought you already understood, there's a lot more where that came from. Hit subscribe, because next time we're pulling on another thread that goes somewhere most people never expect. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel.